Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I've had a few bad experiences with the Ouija board in my time. I vowed I'd never do it again. When I was about 23, I was staying with a friend whose house was most definitely haunted, especially the kitchen, which was right under my room. I'd hear all sorts of noises coming from down there at night, even when I knew she was asleep and her 3-year-old son was in the room next to mine, with a baby gate on it. The first time anything happened, we weren't even using a real Ouija board. Instead, we used candles to communicate, with just yes or no answers. It was just me and my friend. The other two were in the kitchen with the door shut, and her son was asleep in bed upstairs. You couldn't get upstairs without coming through the room we were in. We started asking questions, and eventually, we were getting answers. Then, we asked if this was a friend who had died and, if it was, could they make the candles move? We had 2 in the middle of the table and 8 around the outside. As soon as we said that, there was a swirl in the air around us, and each candle in turn flickered. Up to date, it's the most unexplainable thing that's ever happened to me. I stared at one of the flames and asked if the person who was there could put it out. Neither of us was sitting near the candle I asked to be blown out. It started getting dimmer and dimmer, and then, poof, it went out. We were both excited but a bit creeped out at the same time. Then there was a huge bang from upstairs. My friend went to check, thinking her son had fallen out of bed. She came back down, pale as a sheet, saying he was still asleep, but a load of books from his box was scattered all over the room. They hadn't been there when she put him to bed. Then the scariest thing ever happened. There was another loud thud upstairs, followed by very loud thumping footsteps coming down the stairs. The handle on the door at the bottom started rattling, for only a few seconds, but it was unmistakable. I opened the door, and there was no one there. Just to top the night off, my phone, which was on top of the TV, which was off, started ringing at 2 a.m. I wondered who could be calling at that hour unless it was an emergency. When I got up to check, the number on the display just said 0, repeated over 10 times. That was it, I lost it. I've spent the night in haunted houses, derelict mental hospitals, and the like, but that night scared the hell out of me. When I answered the call, it was just static before cutting off. On a different night, that same friend said she wanted to try a Ouija board in her house. I refused to take part, especially after everything that had happened before. So she and her auntie used the board while I sat on the sofa drinking a beer and playing on my phone. Around 1 a.m., we went up to bed. Her auntie was sleeping on the sofa downstairs. I woke up at about 2 a.m. to the bed shaking. Half asleep, I thought, what the hell have they released from that Ouija board? As I came to, I realized the entire room was shaking, and I could hear the pipes banging under my floor. It was an old house, but then it all just stopped. If I hadn't been drinking, I'd have noped right out of there. But I don't drink and drive. The next morning, I turned on the news and found out there'd been an earthquake at exactly the time I woke up. I've never been so glad for a normal explanation for something. That one's a bit more lighthearted, but still scary at the time. Both of these stories are 100% true. I like to believe in the supernatural, but I'm also very science-minded and always try to find rational reasons for things happening. It takes a lot to convince me that something has no explanation. That first night was one of those times, and 13 years later, I still can't explain it. This happened a few years back when I was younger and stupider. So there we were on a lazy Sunday night, me, Laura, and Tom, all in our early 20s, looking for something to shake off the boredom. Tom, at the time, lived in this old, creaky house, which supposedly had a spooky history. It was dirt cheap, so he didn't seem to mind. He didn't really have the money to mind anyway. The previous tenant had passed away about 10 years ago, which honestly always creeped us out a little. That night, bored with so few things to do, Laura suggested we use a Ouija board to try and contact the previous tenant. None of us had a Ouija board, but Laura knew how to make one, so we went about doing it. I wasn't too sure about it, but after a bit of convincing, I agreed. Tom, being Tom, was all for it without a second thought. We dimmed the lights, creating a moody atmosphere that was more out of boredom than anything else, and gathered around the homemade paper board, placing our hands lightly on the coin we used as a planchette. The air was thick with anticipation. Laura started, "If there's anyone here, give us a sign." The makeshift planchette suddenly moved. We exchanged shocked glances. It was actually happening. I then asked, "Who are you?" "Zio," it spelled out. I shivered. I'd heard about that name before, a supposed malevolent entity known to haunt Ouija board sessions. The makeshift planchette then started to go around the board wildly, forming a figure-8 pattern. Panic started to set in, but we all tried to play it cool. "Why are you here?" Laura asked, hesitantly. "Dark," it spelled. Dark. That was unsettling. "Can you tell us more?" Tom chimed in, trying to mask his unease. The planchette began moving faster, almost forcibly, spelling out disturbing phrases, and continuing the figure-8 pattern. It mentioned things about shadows, death, and wanting to come into our realm. I could see the fear in Laura's eyes, and Tom was starting to look pale. In a moment of courage or sheer stupidity, I blurted out, "Are you good or evil?" The question hung in the air as a chilling silence settled over the room. Suddenly, the planchette began to move with an eerie intensity. It spelled out evil. Fear gripped us as the room grew colder, darkening, despite the absence of any external light source. Whispering voices filled the air, sending shivers down our spines. The Ouija board seemed to take on a life of its own as the planchette moved frantically, continuously tracing the figure-8 pattern. A menacing presence seemed to surround us, and the temperature dropped. We realized, with a mix of fear and excitement, that we had unwittingly summoned something dark. Shadows danced on the walls, and a guttural voice emerged from the board, though we couldn't make out what it was saying. We hastily tried to close the session, but whatever was controlling the board resisted our efforts. It seemed to grow stronger, and the room managed to get darker. In a final, spine-chilling message, the board spelled out, "There is no escape." As time passed, the torment didn't continue in that room, but we felt an eerie sense of being watched by unseen entities. Shadows still moved mysteriously, and whispers of despair seemed to echo in the dark. After that, our lives became a living nightmare. We continued experiencing shadows moving and whispering in our own homes for weeks after the session. It wasn't just me losing my mind, all of us experienced it. In the middle of the night, there'd be knocking on our doors and windows. Shadows seemed to move around our rooms, and there was always that whispering when we were alone. Desperate to rid ourselves of this entity, we sought the help of a priest. None of us were religious at the time, but we didn't know what else to do. Over a couple of sessions, the priest prayed over us and conducted some rituals. To be honest, I don't really know what he did, but the activity seemed to deteriorate over time. I don't know what you believe, but whatever the priest did, it worked. He scolded us about using such a thing, but in the end, we were free of that entity. We were all exhausted after that ordeal. We had narrowly escaped the grip of that entity, and through the intervention of the priest, we were free from its torment. I'll never touch a Ouija board ever again for as long as I live. Back when I was 18, me and my pals, Sarah and Mark, got curious about the supernatural. We heard from people at school about using a Ouija board. It was supposed to let us talk to spirits. We figured, why not give it a try? It seemed harmless enough. One weekend, we gathered at Sarah's place. Mark had bought a Ouija board from a store. I'm not sure exactly where. Since it was bought from a store, we didn't really think anything was going to happen. So we went all out. We turned off the lights, lit some candles, and waited until midnight. I don't know why, it just seemed appropriate. We all put our hands on the Ouija board, fingers on the planchette. We began by Sarah asking, "Is anyone here?" To our surprise, the planchette moved. We weren't sure if Sarah or Mark was moving it. We asked more questions, like, "What's your name?" The planchette spelled out Rebecca. None of us knew a Rebecca. Then it started getting weird. It brought up things it shouldn't know, like personal stuff from our lives. That made us uneasy. How could it know about my dog that passed away when I was 6? The room felt different, cold, and like someone was watching. We asked, "Are you a good spirit?" The planchette moved to no. Fear started to creep in. We said goodbye and tried to move our hands, but the planchette refused. It kept going back to no. We felt trapped, a knot in our stomachs. It spelled DIE. We were scared now, not sure what to do. We didn't want to anger anything we couldn't see or understand. We removed our hands, but the planchette stayed put. The air felt thick and heavy. We heard whispers, like distant voices. I felt goosebumps rise all over my skin. Sarah said, "We need to burn this thing." So we did. But the fire went out, as if it didn't want to be burned. Panic set in, a dreadful feeling taking over. The shadows in the room seemed to dance, making the fear worse. We wanted to leave, but something held us back. We heard footsteps, but it was just us in the house. We huddled together, trying to stay calm. We didn't know what to believe or what to do. The room felt like it was closing in on us, suffocating. We grabbed a candle. Its flickering light offered a bit of solace. Time passed slowly, the shadows fading as dawn approached. We were exhausted, drained from the ordeal. When morning came, we made a promise to never mess with a Ouija board again. The memory of that night still lingers. As I look back at that time, now being 46 and a mother myself, I'm thankful we made it through relatively unharmed. It taught me that some things are better left untouched. And curiosity can lead to dark places. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.